I mean, you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that your dad is like talks down on real estate investing and real estate investors?
No, I think my dad was actually always very encouraging for those things. Dad was always someone who said, you can do it.
I feel like a lot of people have that same issue. They had a good dad, but they did not have a dad who was good at business.
You know, and my dad and my mom, they split up when I was about 4. For me on a go-forward basis, was a really big reminder of seeing things that caused, really a lot of damage for families. Welcome to Real Estate Dad's podcast with Trevor Celso and Max Gonzalez.
Do you plan on having your son, your kids work in your business?
I plan on having them exposed.
I wonder how many people are looking at us right now, like, look at these young dads pontificating, they got their teenage son.
You're totally correct. You're totally correct. I know. We talk about topics for dads, for entrepreneurs in the real estate industry.
Welcome to the Real Estate Dads podcast. We have special guest Mathew Owens, who we've known for a long time in the industry. He's definitely been someone who has a lot of experiences, does a lot in the business, raises capital for a lot of different types of projects, and we're going to hear more about those. But also we're going to talk about just more of the experience he has being a father and his experience in work-life balance, and really just how his upbringing and current life, how those balance out with all of the work that he does, because he's a very busy individual, which he's going to tell us about. And we're looking forward to hearing his stories. So Mathew, let's just jump over to you. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm excited about this topic. And I saw the topic, I was like, oh, this is different. That's awesome to talk about these things that nobody else talks about.
Yeah. And, and that's one of those things that we're hoping you've got some, I'll call it anything that is interesting for the listeners. Everyone has experience of growing up, things that their fathers did great, things that wish their fathers did differently. And then, of course, sadly, our kids are going to have things that are going to be the same. Or I shouldn't say sadly, the good and the bad. But, we're all working through our own fatherhood journeys, and, we're so happy to have you share yours with us. So let's just jump right in. How many kids you got?
I have an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old terrorist daughter. So she is a firecracker, I'll say. So it's pretty fun. It's just like most parents, it's nonstop chaos in the household, of course.
I am sure. And, and how did that, and how old were they? And when did you start this business, and how old were they at that point in time?
So my story is, I'm a CPA. I quit I was doing tax and audit for different CPA firms, and graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in economics with an emphasis in accounting, and quit my CPA firm job in 2006 to go into real estate full time, right before the real estate crash. So I was a real estate genius for about 1.5 years before I got my ass handed to me, of course.
As we all were.
Yeah, exactly. And, but since then, we have flipped now over 1,000 houses. We have over 35 million lent out to flippers in different markets. I've raised over $150 million for real estate. We do a lot of value add multifamilies, mobile home parks. We invest in debt, doing all different and other businesses and things like that. And so I have great teams to help me and keep my sanity, of course. At the same time, right in the middle of all this, my kids were born, right? So I would say, an older father, where I was 37 when my son was born, and I'm 45 now. So, and I feel like I appreciate them more, because I'm not in my 20s being a bad father, going out drinking probably still what I would have been doing, if I was a younger father. And, and then it kind of changed my perspective, where, yes, in the beginning, it's scary for fathers, right? We just want to make sure we're going to provide and make sure that we're going to be able to create enough money to support our family. And it becomes almost like you can dive too deep into trying to fill that, and it becomes a emotional and psychological thing, right? Where you got to take that step back still and spend time with the kids, and be in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, for me, it's stress. I look at all these things that I want to provide, and then, one thing we talked about before this podcast, but the kernel of that is to be there for the kids, which is what we all, want to work out and balance. So so please continue. And that was so impressive. So 1,000 homes, raised $150 million for real estate deals. I mean, there were so many things that you mentioned in there. That was a lot. And I can only imagine that was even a ramped up experience from when, you started to now, which is just such a wide breadth of experiences.
Yeah, I have got a lot of wrinkles from that, right? So, and my wife has been through a lot too, because of course, when I take a loss, which you're going to take losses in this game, right? In any business, and when you go through trials and tribulations and stresses and all that kind of stuff, your family sees that on you, right? And they're right there with you a lot of times. I try to shield my wife from some of the stresses I go through, because I'm like, half of it, 99% of my fear is not going to ever come to fruition. So why give her that fear, and I take it on my shoulders myself, which could be to my detriment on my own stress level. Got to meditate a lot, of course. But at the end of the day, you realize how much your business can affect your family too. And, I remember taking a loss and telling my wife, hey, I just lost, I remember 50 grand. And back then that was a huge amount for me. And I was telling her, hey, put your hand on my chest. I can't breathe. I just lost a salary today, and you're just like, this is just a hard emotional thing to deal with. And, but then you realize when you have a mindset shift, like, after that occurred, I remember getting up the next morning and saying, okay, I'm going to find a way to make this money back, like today. What can I do right now? What action items can I do right now to make that back? And I ended up getting another deal under contract and wholesaling it to another 1031 exchange investor and making me $70,000 on that, one deal. And that mindset shift for me enabled me that empowerment of getting through that adversity and emotionally coming over that. It wasn't really just like, the hit wasn't going to ruin me, but at the same time, like emotionally that was tough, but getting through the emotion of that helps you like really show the things that you want to teach your kids, and take that step back and say, don't give them everything, make life hard for them, so that because it's like, what's the story? Like, weak men create, or I don't know what it was. It was like
Stronger kids.
Exactly. So
Go ahead. Yeah.
don't let your kids be weak by pampering their butts, so.
Yeah, you're bringing up a very real factor in the market right now, which people hear of this, but it's victims of fluency. And, and Jordan Peterson and Andrew Huberman talk about this, quite a bit,
right?
Where there's these, you get dopamine from having merit-based accomplishments. And that's anything. You work hard and you get a dopamine reward as a result of that.
Right.
And there's some individuals who unfortunately don't have that given to them. And that's one thing as a father that I recognize where, I say, I really want to make sure I'm pushing my kids. And, and one thing that, you just kind of touched on, and, Trevor, I hope you don't have any stories of losing money, but
not that
in entrepreneurship, these things.
There's stories.
But, the black eyes that we get are also these experiences that we want to be able to, come back from, learn from, and they carve us.
Right.
They carve us, they make us better. And they also, in your situation, you turned it into a win. You said, hey, I've got to fix this. This money was, lost in whatever opportunity was. And you went out today, I've got it. You didn't let it sink you.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that you realize that these adversity things that actually happen to you push you in the direction you should be going anyways. And so even those losses are, get to the point where you realize they are there for you to get through and to deal with the pain at the time you need it. And I know it sounds, a little crazy, but at the same time, it really is 100% true. Like I just, about a year ago, a little bit more than that, I took a 400,000 plus hit from a contractor that stole a bunch of money from me. Right.
Oh, wow.
And what's crazy is that because of the hits I took in the past and the adversity I got through, I'm able to just be like, okay, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm like went after the dude and did what I needed to do to make sure, but I'm still, taking the L on it because it doesn't, never is worth it. But, emotionally, you're able to move forward with those things, which permeate into strength to show your kids because, you could talk till you're blue in the face, but if I'm doing the opposite of what I'm telling my kids, they're seeing what I'm doing. Right. And,
yes.
And it really makes you take that step back and look at yourself and say, how do I change myself, because everything is internal 100%, so that I can present the best light and teach my kids the most. And it really makes you have that yearning to have that self-awareness about yourself, because if you can teach that to your kids, like I'll give you an example. My daughter, emotional breakdown like every 5-year-old does, and I'm sitting there talking to her saying, baby, you have the control. You have the control. I want you to breathe through your nose really deep and breathe out really, as well. And keep doing that. Do it with me. And I'll do it with her to calm her down emotionally. And then I'm like, and of course she's in the beginning, I don't have control, like, and all this, of course. But once shit that happens, it really made a switch in me, because I remember the next day when I did that for her, she goes to my wife and says, Daddy really helped me. He calmed me down.
Oh,
And,
it's great.
and I was just like, oh, dude, you don't realize how much of an effect you being able to go through hits and have your own emotional control in place happens. And you can't always do it. You got to cut yourself a break when you get mad or, curse sometimes or whatever. Right.
It's emotional control. And, and for this, $400,000 hit you took, that's such a huge number. But, you handled it, what it sounds like a professional. And, and had this opportunity to also, really, had a teaching moment to your daughter on emotional control.
Right.
And, because those are when those things start. And, that brings into something that we all see as adults, where you see people who don't have good emotional control. And then, and I always wonder, I go, where did this start? At what point was it that there was something that went off the rails, that, someone was able to, get so far down the road that, you see a bad decisions being made as a result of, poor emotional control.
Right. And I think it's important to understand, like, these, a lot of times when they don't have that emotional control, it's a lack of confidence in themselves, because
Absolutely.
when you take a hit and you stand back up and you actually become successful after that, you become strong, and your mentality becomes strong, and you're able to have a lot more of that control than you would have ever had before. And a lot of people haven't taken those hits. And so they're going to be more angry at people and, more fly off the handle, instead of saying, how do I get what I need out of this situation by having the right tact and the right strategy, instead of, because that negativity towards others doesn't ever get you what you want. Maybe every once in a while when you got to chew somebody out or something, but it's not usually common, right? So that's
actually said
help.
Something that kind of, like, you said, where does it start? And I think that's a good question, because everyone at some point takes a hit in their life, and like getting back up, like,
absolutely.
I remember watching my, family members, and they were pretty strong men, but, I had to kind of like consciously go to the next level and just, I'm working on like Matt's level of emotional management. But I'm curious, Matt, like, where did that start for you? Is that something that you saw yourself growing up in your family, or did you have to like make a conscious shift to be like that?
So I definitely had, I'll say, not anger issues, but I would get angry for 3 seconds and then be fine afterwards, or, get mad and have that outburst and then stop myself, over a period of time. And my dad had that too. He would get angry about stuff and stubborn about stuff. I saw him growing up being, even though he had that, like, he was a military guy. He was a ranger and a sniper in Vietnam. He was a black belt in karate, and like literally was my, crutch in a lot of ways, where I'd go to him and had a massive amount of respect for him. There was also a healthy amount of fear there too, because he's a strong dude and he's going to tell you exactly what he thinks, and you're not going to go and talk to him in certain ways. You know what I mean? And so there was that clear boundary. At the same time, he was really strong. And I lost him when I was 26 years old and he was 56 years old. And it was probably one of the hardest things of my entire life to deal with, because he was the person that I would go to with all of the problems in my life, that I needed advice from and things like that. And I still remember the day before he died, I told him he could go, and I had a 1-year-old little sister at the time, and she's now 19 years old now, which is crazy. She doesn't care about money at all. I keep trying to talk to her about money, but she doesn't care. She's 19. But and I told my dad, hey, I got this. You can go. Like, I'll make sure my sister's taken care of. I'll make sure my brother's taken care of, and I think it screwed me up a little bit, right? Where I grind to mentally take care of the family to the detriment of myself. And I was doing that for detriment of my health for a long time too, because, I was 35 pounds more than I am right now, and would eat bad and not exercise as much. And it affected my home life massively, because I was so focused on grind. I have to do this. I have to take care of everybody. And I've always had that in my head, where I have this underlying psychological need to take care of people and whether I should or not, sometimes I shouldn't waste time helping like random people, because it's to my detriment. But I had to get out of that, right? I had to go to counseling to say, what is causing this inside me? Let me go back and think about what has affected me in my life. And that was what made me have a lot more of that emotional control, is realizing the reasons why I was this way I was, and focusing on too much work and not enough family, and having to feel like I have to grind, I have to get this done, because otherwise my family is not going to get what they need, which is untrue, right? So
And do you feel like that effort to, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
yeah, no, it's
That's
18
those
years
things never,
now. So
never
yeah.
really go away. But in that, what you described as, that it was a hard event that you really, had some massive growth from, and stepped into a role of both stress and, this, giving your father this peace, before he passed. Was that something that he also taught you, and a lot of those skills from growing up? Say, hey, you need to be an individual who, when the challenge comes up, you need to meet it? Or did you, when it came to counseling, those things you described, were those things that you brought in yourself and said, those weren't things came from my father, but I have to figure them out going
Yeah,
forward?
I really think a lot of that came from the upbringing I had from my father and my mom, where, especially my father being a strong man, it was expected that we're going to be strong too. You know what I mean? And there was very little emotion in my household, not a lot of hugs and all that kind of stuff. It was, my dad was working hard, working two jobs and stuff like that. My mom worked as well. But my dad, it took my parents going through a divorce before he realized that he was too much of a hard ass and loosened up a little bit. You know what I mean? And getting out of the emotional situation of marriage and all that stuff. And he wasn't, crazy or anything like that. But, at the same time, a lot of that, he taught me, hey, this is what you do. You stand up to that adversity, and you push yourself, and you take responsibility, for what you're doing. And I think that's what I was probably emotionally and mentally doing at the time, by giving my dad that peace when he passed, and telling him that, when that occurred. Don't get me wrong, it was still the hardest damn thing in the world. But at the same time, you realize all of a sudden I stepped into the leader of the family role at 26, which honestly was, this adversity is what gives you the character that you need to be in order to be successful in business and family. And I've had a lot of it, from my parents, divorce, to my dad passing, to failing in business immediately. Like when I quit my CPA firm job to go into real estate, we were flipping a bunch of houses. I got an office at the World Trade Center in Long Beach on the 23rd floor. We're doing everything wrong, but I thought I was dope because we're flipping houses, and I had a 790 credit score with 290 grand worth of empty credit card lines available to me. And my whole ego was based off of this persona of me being a CPA, where I don't ever miss bills. I like always make sure I'm take care of business that we're flipping. And, all of a sudden when we lost everything and I lost my credit, my ego was destroyed, where I was just like, oh my God, what? The worst thing that I could think would happen to me at the time was my credit getting destroyed. Now I can think of some worse things, but at the same, and obviously this is very little adversity compared to a lot of things people go through with a lot of different deaths and stuff like that. And, losing kids or other stuff is just not even a comparison, but it's this stuff that happens to you that gives you that character, I think, over time. And I think I had a good base with my father that, started there. I have a ton of respect for him, and I still give his good friends a lot of crap still to this day, and talk trash just like he would, so.
Those tragedies, you're right. There's such I don't want to say competition, but in the grand scope, there's always these other things you hear about. You go, my gosh, who went through whatever that was. I think for your story, what I find really fascinating about it is that, for what was, pretty serious tragedy, that you were a swimmer. You went, hey, I'm just going to step up, and I'm going to step up and I'm going to do this. And, and that was now, and I'm so sorry, I don't know how old you are now. 26, he passed when you were 26. So that was how long ago?
Yeah, I'm 45 now. Yeah. So.
Wow. What an experience.
I'm curious, man. You were talking about like,
go ahead.
I've been struggling with I've been getting better, but like how to, manage time, not just in business, but in personal life with family, and, making sure I'm a good dad, and like coming up with ways to help my kids become an adult someday. And you mentioned you're going to like go speak to people about this. And you got to put together a presentation on teaching that to people. What does that look like? What are you doing there?
So look, don't get me wrong. I think we're all a work in process in this area, as getting out of our own head and making sure we're living in the moment with the kids, right? I think the biggest thing is when you are with the kids, making sure you're living in the moment. You're not, focused on other things and constantly, in your head thinking about the next business thing. Being there, focused on them is a big key, right? And obviously everybody can get the hell off their phones, and stuff like that. Of course, all of us can. It's a big addiction for tons of people out there, including myself sometimes, because I got a ton of things going. At the same time, I try my hardest to literally have this, system in place where I'm like at certain times I'm separating my business and personal life. And I do a lot of that through meditation. It helps me clear my mind to, like, before going in the house, just sit there for 10 minutes and breathe. I do that in the morning and then right before I try to go in the house, because how do you turn your brain off when you're going 100 miles an hour and you got a million things and you still have a million things to do, but you're like, I got to cut it off. I have to separate. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is planning, right? Like, what do you want to do with your kids? Like, I have a list on my desk that's like, make sure all the things I want to make sure I get done every day that's outside of work, right? Like, that's meditation, proper sleep, vitamins, working out, playing with the kids, planning outings with the kids where, hey, you're just going to go to the park twice a week with the kids. And then other times of the week for twice a week, you're going to go play, I'll call it, cash flow for kids or something like that, right? Robert Kiyosaki financial education game. Or you're going to teach them something like that. Like, I literally have a list of every class, every topic that I want my kids to learn, including law and real estate and finance and, it's and then emotional control and relationships and things like that. The things that I think growing up, a lot of us weren't taught, like, were you taught how to deal with girls, when you're growing up as a boy? You're not, like, yeah, you might talk about it a little bit, but it's not like something that's taught to you on how to actually not be nervous and how to, like, how to break a conversation and really just have confidence. Right. And so, focusing on the things that you think you didn't get growing up and making a list of those things to say, these are the things I really want to teach. Like, I started doing videos with my son where I'm, talking to him about what his favorite things are, just like this. And, on a video. And of course I was like, what's your favorite thing in the world, buddy? And he's like, I love it when you coach me at basketball, Dad. So of course now I'm
so
coaching
awesome,
for the rest of my life. But
this is great. This is great. So you have them on this full curriculum of things.
Well, right. And don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's way over their pay grade right now, for law and, auditing, and accounting.
You done the cash flow game? Have you done that?
Yeah, they do that. And, I try to teach them about the mentality. And of course,
that's awesome.
Both of my kids hate the government as much as I do. So that's a little personality trait that they got, so, but yeah, I mean, looking at it from that scale and saying, what do I want to teach them? Is there something that I can talk to them about to teach them, consistently on a daily basis, just out of this topic list? Is there like something I could bring up that they would be interested in, just to have a conversation each day, or, if you can't do that, maybe every other day or something like that, to just have a 15-minute conversation with your kids about those topics and teaching them something that you think is valuable. I remember my dad, he literally made us get out a checkbook and taught us that. When I was doing accounting classes in college, he was teaching accounting at Loyola Marymount in LA and literally made me do extra homework. I'm like, I'm in college. Like, screw you, dude. I don't want to do this. Like, are you kidding me right now? All I care about is girls. Here, have an Old English 40 with me, Dad. He's like, seriously, an Old English 40? What's wrong with you? So, but like, that's what you think about in college, right? So, but it's, at the same time, even though I didn't want to do it and I knew I didn't want to do it, those things were majorly ingrained in me, right? And it's cutting your kids a break and realizing, yeah, they're never, ever, ever going to do exactly what you want them to do. I specifically remember my dad catching me and my buddies in the backyard smoking pot when we were like 15 years old or something like that. And I was shocked. My friends were about to run over the wall because they don't want to get in trouble with their parents. And he didn't get any of us in trouble. He just said, look, guys, you guys are too young. don't lie to me about it. I won't ever like get you in trouble for this, but I'll talk to you about it and tell you why you shouldn't be doing it. And that permeated massively with me, just to be open and say, look, you're going to be stupid. You're going to make mistakes. I did some really stupid things in junior high and high school that you're going, wow, how did I live? You know what I mean? So how did I survive? And I think you got to cut your kids a break and realize they're going to make their own mistakes and they're not going to follow exactly in your footsteps what you want, you know?
He used it as an education moment, which is the better way to have him be available to you, really, than closing that door. You hear a lot of fathers who, they blow their stack and they get really pissed off. And all of a sudden, when there's more serious issues, the kids don't come back to the dad. They don't want to talk to him because they know they'll get mad, versus that scenario that really probably opened a lot of communication with you guys.
Right. And it's funny because you get different traits from different parents. Even though my dad made me do that with the bookkeeping, he wasn't necessarily great with saving money and doing all that stuff. He would spend money. My mom saved like $20,000 or 25 grand in college while she, like penny pinching everything, and was a saver and, super responsible with money and all that stuff. And it's funny because you get different traits from different people. And I think having a two-parent household really does significantly help with the upbringing, because a father is super important, because they give that guidance and direction and that that sternness that I think kids need. And the mom obviously gives the emotional support a lot more than the dad does, so both of those things are massively important from a well-rounded kid standpoint, of course.
That was freaking awesome, man. That was so many strings we could pull and we could go forever, but like, thank you for your stories and your openness and like honest, the amount of value you provided. Just me sitting here listening, like I got to make a list for my kids.
This was great.
Like right away. So thank you.
Yeah, get it in your head so that it's always there. Like everything that you can do. Like I literally go out and I'm like, okay, what the heck could I? Because sometimes when you're in the moment, how do you think about that, right? So like, write down 50 things you could do for free with your kids, or minimal cost, so that you're like, pick one. Like go do it. Just get out, and go do it.
So Matthew, do you have a meditation that you got? A meditation is on YouTube? Do you just have something you do yourself, or how do you do that?
So I actually follow Wim Hof. I don't know if you know who he is, but he basically has been able to control his body temperature and his immune system and heal himself through meditation and breathing, which is incredible. They've actually showed him in freezing weather where his body temperature is at a consistent degrees, where it's not getting cold, because he's able to heat himself internally. And so the power of meditation is key. I really just try to go and sit there for 15 minutes at a minimum each time I meditate, and try to get out of my own head and breathe and focus on my breathing, because breathing is, getting oxygen in your system is probably one of the healthiest things you can do as well. So just breathing deep and then exhaling deep consistently for 15 minutes straight really calms you. Like if you, Andrew Huberman was one of the ones that I read this for, when he said, hey, breathe deep, and then take one more breath, like deeper, and it like opens up these endorphins inside you, where it like gets all the oxygen in your system and really helps you de-stress massively. And so I try to practice doing that and just clearing my mind. And it's hard because you will automatically start thinking and you're like, beat yourself up about it, and you're like, go back to your breathing. So it takes practice to do that. But I try to follow Wim Hof on that, and also try to meditate a couple times a day doing that, especially when you're dealing with high stress environments. There's days where you're dealing with, 50 problems before noon on a Monday, and you're just like, oh God, I got to breathe. Like, you start to feel it in your gut. You start to feel it in your stress levels, and you're like, no, let me just take a step back for a minute. And then also thinking about what you're grateful for while you're doing that really helps put the fears and stresses in perspective, and saying, hey, I got my health. My kids are healthy right now. I have a loving wife and a family, and, I'm coaching basketball, and, putting the real life in perspective, instead of you're going, this is money. It doesn't really matter. I'll be dead and it's all going to be gone. Who cares?
It's even funny money with how much the government's printing it.
Yeah, it's all fake, so go trade and barter food. That's why I want to farm,
I mean, we could keep going through some of these questions. Are there any, when we've talked about so much already, is there anything that's going on in the world today that, you really feel like you want to be ahead of with your kids? You mentioned, your father kind of catching you guys, when you're 15. Are there any of these experiences that you're either projecting on that you know you're going to deal with eventually, or things that are going on right now that you're really wanting to focus on?
So, a lot of what I care about a lot is, two primary things: financial education and how to, and also so that because 90% of the people out there don't have the right financial education to be able to support themselves. I see a lot of doctors and attorneys and things like that that make great money, but they don't know the direction of where they're going. They don't understand how to never trade their time for money again, or build those assets that will do that for them long term, as well, and have control over their real future instead of just giving it to a broker, for example, and letting them, do what they do with it, right? And with lack of incentive for performance and all that kind of stuff involved. So there's so many scams out there that you see a lot of people taking hits, and a lot of lack of knowledge base about how to develop passive cash flow streams, how to invest and do homework on, property and deals and investments. And so, like, I have a big yearning to teach them about that, but also I think it's super important nowadays to focus a lot on self-sustainment and being able to survive outside of the current system that we are in.
Okay.
Learning how to grow food, for example, learning how, water purification works, and, self-sustainment works, and, all of that kind of stuff, I think is the utmost importance right now. I personally am very nervous about the stability of the overall economy and our governments and all that kind of stuff, and, and central bank digital currencies and all these risks that I see out there. And I think that the risk of, global financial collapse and U.S. collapse is greater than it's ever been because of the amount of printing and the instability that creates out there. And I think it's super important to be able to survive long term, to know those things. And so as a parent, you're like, how do I make sure my kids are happy
Yeah.
and they don't die? Like yeah, those two things, right? So, and so it's like, what are the risks? Okay, like, look at this giant risk that nobody really, there's people that talk about it. I'm a prepper, so
Oh, wow.
I got food and water supplies, but I also live in Southern California going,
I like to call it homesteading because you're only planning
yes,
on prepping.
there you go.
Then the preppers, it's 'cause you said something that, being self-sustaining, and a lot of us, big wake up call when COVID happened, when, wow, things can really get crazy.
Right.
And with everything you're talking about, it's so funny because I am going to ask you for this, but if you've got good books, recommendations on exactly what you said, how to purify water, how to store food, how to collect rainwater, how to grow your own crops, and maybe a small area in your backyard. If you've got books on these, I would love to have them. In fact, we'll put them on the website. And, because I'm sure that you're not alone in people who have interest in those things. I have interest in those things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, and we look at, you really nailed it on the head in regards to, there are risks out there that in our lifetime, we haven't previously had to really deal with them.
Right.
And, and when you're the father of the family, you're the one who also has to worry about these things.
Right.
Hopefully they never occur.
Yes.
But if they do, hopefully they never occur. But if they do, do you have 30 days supply of food and water?
Right.
And are you prepared to be able to collect water, clean it, and live I'm going to say it, if the grid goes down, and, we have to.
Right. And I think that's, I have some survival guides that I bought, and my wife bought me, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos and just, ooh and ah over their supplies, and stuff like that. But, at the same time, looking at it from that angle, in addition to the homestead environment and having that self-sustainability, plus, of course, all the pesticides and the poisons and the food and the lack of micronutrients in the food, you're going, how do I get my kids clean food that has the right micronutrients, because the soil's been all destroyed from, all the Roundup and all that stuff, right? And so, I look at that side of things and the importance of homesteading from a health perspective. And we have a massive garden in our yard and lots of flower pots and, big raised flower beds in our front and backyard and stuff like that. And teaching them those things now, but also, some of the other things that I think are important from not just a homesteading, but a plan B type situation, right? At some point, and I hope it's never during our lifetime, but at some point,
Man, you think
the
so?
U.S. is going to turn communism. It's going to turn into socialist and then communist at some point, right? It's already, you see it starting to go there. I'm being very optimistic by saying this because I live in California and I feel like I already live in communism. But, at the same time, it's not real communism yet, right? But what I'm saying though is that having a plan B, learning how to get additional passports, learning how to set yourself up to be able to move out of the country if you needed to flee. I can't believe I'm even saying that out of the US, right? Because it's usually been the safe haven type situation. But, I'm looking at the risks, saying, how do I protect my family, right? How do I make sure long term that they are, have options and can move? And don't get me wrong, it scares the hell out of me to give them the experience of traveling internationally, because if they move away from me, I'm going to kick their butt, So,
Man, do you have a bug out bag,
I'm
Matt?
like, they better not leave me,
Yeah, I do.
I do have a bug out bag. Yes, I do. So, and I have 6 55-gallon water
Oh
barrels on the
man.
side of my house right now too, by the
I
way.
get
So
it. Dude, I get it. I get it. I totally do. I get it. And I get it from the standpoint of just, these things, you see these things and you think, wars do happen.
right.
Wars do happen. These things do happen, and with the country going socialist or communist, I really hope that it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I also understand the method of big government with how they say democracies work really well until the democracy recognizes that it can vote itself more
That's
money.
been so long.
And once that
Right.
occurs,
And it's already happened.
then you end up in this situation where the government continues to kind of grow because it becomes this entity that now has more and more weight. And how do they support more and more weight? With more jobs, they have more taxation. People don't quite recognize this, but all of the money, everything, all of the money that gets spent, domestic, abroad, services, infrastructure, everything is 100% all over the world is covered by U.S. private business. Because if you remove the private business, then you would only have government, which would be communism.
Right.
So all the salaries for the government and everyone else, it's covered by the U.S. private sector. And that, I don't know if I want to call it shrinking. It's still a growing body, but there's a question with how in check the government is in regards to a lot of these things. And you in the business world and all of us in the business world, we often feel these things. I have hope. I'm still in expectation is seeing the pushback right now, and I like seeing it. And I like to be the optimist that says, hey, you know what, we're going to be able to push off the communism, the socialism, and we are, because there's going to be a realization that it doesn't work, and when that occurs, you will have another revolution because that cannot work.
Yeah.
Right.
My fear is the in between time that could take to happen. But
And I feel like a lot of people have really woken up over the last couple years, especially seeing the extra pushes from the government and bodies, and the kind of system that's actually surrounding us that was hidden for so long is now becoming very, very apparent. And so I'm optimistic from that standpoint as well. And it's just all these things are. What if, what do I do to protect my family and if that risk comes to fruition, so that's how I look at this. And I hope that I'm, hitting all the risks and all that. And I think, keep thinking of moving to Montana and living on 20 acres or something like that. And, it's a different life, but at the same time, like the beauty and the nature, that's, I think, how humans are supposed to be, right? Getting kids outside. I don't know if you remember when we were kids, my parents were like, get outside and don't come back till the streetlights are on. I don't want to see your butt in this house. And go ahead and climb up to the top of this giant tree and go off of skateboard ramps and almost die. It's like stuff like that. But
my parents just weren't there. They didn't say come back at this time. They just weren't anywhere. It was just, we just got home when we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, as far as living outside, no, I love the Montana story. Absolutely. The getting back to nature.
You need another zero on that acreage for it to be right.
Say again.
I think I've done the math. That's my end game, dude. 300 acre
200
beef
acres.
ranch.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing everything for. As I can as soon as possible.
There you go. There you go.
Sure. I would totally see that. Yeah, you showing up on this horse, just a big beard, just long hair, this child, behind this beef cattle ranch. I could totally see.
I grew up on a ranch, which I was very fortunate, but I couldn't wait to leave. 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I was gone. I've been in the city since, and I can't wait to get back now.
Yeah.
It's so much. It's the way to be.
Yeah, I feel like, when you're younger, it's a harder life. I think there's less people around. You want to be around people and
That's it. Yeah.
and, seeing stuff and exploring stuff. So I hear that a lot.
But at the same time, it's like I look around me and all these city folk don't really know how to work that hard. So you get an advantage from it, that you realize later in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the manual labor versus the desk jobs. And there's that skill set that you're talking about, Matt, which is, how to do some of these tasks that, is a little bit lost, because we go to the grocery store for our food. We have water that's available out of the sink.
Right.
And then the question of, what could happen if those things weren't available, it really has everyone really immediately scratch their head and go, well,
Right.
how could those things not be available? And again, as we say this, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on these things, but it's one of those things that, I just view as plan for the worst, have a plan, and then hope for the best, and hopefully things will, maintain the way that they currently are. And, and heaven forbid,
Right.
you end up owning a 20-acre ranch in Montana, and these things never happen anyway, and you just own the ranch.
Can we just come visit you?
It'd be fantastic. So,
Right.
yeah. So just moving away from that rabbit hole, because I know we could actually go down that for a long time. Business-wise, what are you working on right now? So you told us about a lot of your history, a lot of what you've done, and what are you doing now on a go forward? And is there anything that, anyone who's listening to this would want to contact you for, or anything else also? Because we'd love hearing if there's a need for that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm very much an active operator. I'm slowly moving towards being a lot more passive and, bringing in additional teams to buy my time back and things like that so that I can take off. My goal is to take Mondays and Fridays off and, basically take the kids to the park and and the beach and do those types of things a lot more on Mondays and Fridays very, very consistently. And so right now I'm focused on, we're in the process and have under contract a 645 unit mobile home park.
Fantastic.
In Wichita, Kansas. We have a debt fund that we run, and we do promissory notes where we lend it out to flippers in different markets around the country. I'm about to do a joint venture flip package of houses that we're doing multiple flips on in a package of houses that we'll raise a couple $1 million on and split it with investors that are working with us. We are involved in multiple other projects that are all mostly cash flow related, where we just help investors do our investments create financial freedom in their life through real estate, right? That's literally what we do. And I teach people how to structure their investments in their life in a specific way. And I do so many different asset classes that are good for certain people at certain times. Like I wouldn't go tell, an 80-year-old, to go buy a bunch of single family home rental properties and manage the managers themselves. Like that's not in the cards at that time. They need promissory notes to get them cash flow, right? So every single month. And so, we teach people how to do these strategies to fit their life, and we help them with the structuring and the legalities and the liability protection and how to actually protect them by doing the homework on a lot of these deals ourselves. And so we serve these different deals up for those specific purposes, because there's a big lack of that out there, right? There's a lot of people that don't know how to create this financial freedom. Like the majority of people are not in real estate, even if, that's my sphere of influence is a lot of real estate investors, and you think it's common knowledge. But if you go out to the general public and you start talking about financial freedom and real estate, they think I got to go buy a house myself. I got to go invest in a multifamily myself. Oh my God, how do I do the financing? How do I deal with this? And you don't have to do any of that. You just got to invest with the right operator and do the homework on that operator that already knows what they're doing, that specializes in that asset class, so you can make money along with them. Now you got to do a lot of homework, and you got to know how to do that homework, but it's a hell of a lot easier than knowing how to do a flip and knowing how to do a multifamily and learning the trials and tribulations you go there. So that's what I really have a passion at, is teaching people how to create that financial freedom and teaching people how to be able to build that within their life based on what they want in their life, as far as time freedom and cash flow and their own comfort level, right? So that's what I love doing. That stuff,
awesome.
because it's rewarding. I got multiple people that are retired right now that are making like $30,000 a month with me.
Wow, that's
on
fantastic.
projects.
That's
They're just,
fantastic.
like, traveling the world and doing that kind of stuff, So.
And how do people get in touch with you?
You can go to my website at MathewOwens.com with one T in Matthew. So MathewOwens. And it's Matthew with one T because my parents couldn't spell at all. So that's what I keep saying, why it's all spelled wrong. And, my middle name is Patrick because my mom's name was Patty and my dad's name was Rick. They're creative, whatever.
Makes you original.
Yes, exactly. So
the reason I'm asking about that meditation is, we'll put on the website, the Real Estate Dads podcast website, we'll put a link to your website. And if you've got any books on any of those homesteading, survivalist things. We'll put a list of those on the website, and
Cool.
we'll put a link to Wim Hof if you have any of his stuff that guests would find of interest.
Absolutely.
And Matt, you've been such a great guest. I'm
For
just
sure.
so thankful that we had you here to share so many great things to do with your kids. And also, from someone who has just accomplished so much, because there's so much trading, our own personal time to do these things. And, for you to accomplish so much, you've really done a lot of that,
Right.
of multiplying your own time by doing things effectively, which clearly shows if you're able to put together, the course curriculum for your kids of these really fantastic experiences and things to really prepare them and also have bonding with their father, which is just so great. So thank you so much for sharing. This has just really been fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it very much, guys.
All right. This is the Real Estate Dads podcast with Mathew Owens, and we'll catch you guys up on the next episode.